Good day, dear makers. Welcome back. Well, welcome back to me because I took a little bit of time off because, as you can tell, I'm sitting down right now because I busted up my ankles in a very weird fluke type of thing, literally during meditation. I just sat cross-legged for way too long and tore some ligaments or something. I never went to the hospital. I just like winging it right now. Anyways, we're not continuing with our typical series today. Because I had some time on my back, I took that as an opportunity because I'm able to take the advantage in any sort of scenario. And I delved deep into my psyche, which gave me the inspiration to do this presentation on the subconscious mind because it rules most of our life. And so today I have a iPad presentation for you that I'm gonna split screen in a moment, and we're gonna work off that than our typical whiteboard. But before I do that, I wanna kind of give a little intro on the subconscious. And I have some notes in front of me because I wanna hit all of these points correctly because I want you to apply this invaluable knowledge to your life and your ability to turn your dreams into reality. But when people talk about the subconscious, it's usually this very vague, abstract, shadowy, and almost mystical thing, and there's a reason for that. By definition, the subconscious is not directly accessible by awareness, and it's even evident through Carl Jung's, the godfather of the human psyche in modern psychology, in his nomenclature for it. He calls it the unconscious, which lives below the threshold of perception. So when people speak about it as if they fully understand what the subconscious really is, they're usually overreaching. That being said, well, you can see, because you can't really know something that you're not directly aware of. But that being said, not being able to see something clearly doesn't mean that it isn't real or influential. What is relatively clear and well established is how the subconscious gets programmed. And so we can see its fingerprints in many aspects of our lives. It's in our habits, it's in our emotional reactions, it's in the way that we self-sabotage ourselves, in the things that we are attracted to, our fear responses, and then automatic decisions. The subconscious runs most of our life. You're familiar with that iceberg analogy where 5% is above the surface, and that's our conscious mind, and 95% of the iceberg is below. That's not the exact split for an iceberg, but that's the split for the conscious and subconscious mind. The subconscious is absolutely massive and extremely powerful. And when the subconscious it's like the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, they need to work together because when they're misaligned, it really works against you and it overrides your own logic, which is very reasonable and ultimately wants to help you out. And it also blocks progress and it keeps you stuck in very familiar patterns. But when it is aligned, conscious intention actually becomes a amplifier. It supplies you with the right energy, with the confidence, with the intuition, with the momentum, and the sheer quote unquote good luck necessary to achieve your goals. Now, most people think that they have a problem with discipline, with motivation, with willpower, but that's not the case. The real issue lives deeper in the human psyche. Now, if you've ever wondered why, after applying all of the willpower that you can absolutely muster, you still remain stagnant in the same spot. Why self-sabotage is a repeating pattern even after you have applied all of the awareness to it, it's still a problem in your life. Why even after you do everything right, all the right things, say all the right stuff, work extremely hard, things still don't turn out the way that they're supposed to. And why you're always experiencing friction like there's an invisible force working against you. That's the subconscious mind. And this lesson will change everything because today we're talking about the unconscious self, how it actually gets programmed, and why it quietly runs your habits, your finances, your health, your body, your physique, and ultimately every aspect of your life. And once you get this, you will be equipped with the knowledge to stop fighting yourself and start creating real change, the kind that turns your dreams into reality. Okay, so without further ado, let's go split screen and dive into this. We're going to first talk about Carl Jung because he is the pioneer in this space, and he has 6 characteristics for the unconscious, which we're going to go over because it's going to give us a wonderful overview of it before we dive into it even deeper. The first characteristic of the unconscious in Carl Jung's view is that it is alive. It is active. It is also creative. It is not some sort of storage bin for repressed emotions and junk. It thinks, it feels, it responds, and it also compensates for the ego. And so in Carl Jung's view, the unconscious is often wiser than the conscious mind because it sees the whole psyche and not just a narrow ego perspective. The second characteristic of the unconscious is that it is compensatory, meaning that the unconscious compensates for the one-sidedness of the conscious mind. If the ego becomes too rigid, inflated, fearful, moralistic, or stuck in one particular identity, the unconscious then pushes back in a big way. This is why you often find, an example of this is like children who live very strict lives often tend to become extremely rebellious in their young adulthood. Or when people, like humans who live by standard societal rules, once they hit the peak of what they expected should have been the reward for all of their hard labor, they become the top of, the partner in the law firm, the wonderful doctor, etc., or, the great businessman. When they reach there, they end up having like some sort of like death happens within them because they stuck within one particular identity and were promised that this is supposed to be the best that life has to offer. They received all of that and they still feel empty, and then they go through a sense of like a depression or a compression. So in order for the mind to tell itself that your answers are no longer out there, you have to search inward. So that there's a huge role for the unconscious mind to compensate when the conscious mind just follows its own direction instead of the heart and the soul. And the unconscious fulfills a role of breaking that apart when the conscious mind veers off too far in one direction or identity. And what this really does is help restore balance when the conscious mind sort of loses it. A third characteristic is that there are really 2 layers to the unconscious. One is the personal unconscious, and the other is the collective unconscious. And the personal unconscious is the forgotten experiences or the repressed emotions or the unprocessed trauma or even the rejected traits, meaning the shadow self. And all of this is shaped by life history. But it is the collective unconscious, which is one of Jung's more radical contributions to the space. And that has to do when it comes to archetypes, mythical patterns, and instinctual images and symbols. I'm going to give you a little bit of example of each of those. So when it comes to archetypes are like the mother figure, the hero, the trickster, the magician, the sage, the caregiver, the lover, it's the trickster and the joker, and there's many, many more. There's the outlaw, etc. And I was a brand strategist before doing this. I was a brand strategy consultant. I worked with some of the biggest brands in the world and also at agencies. And we use this as tools. And even you see the biggest brands embody archetypes, right? You have Harley Davidson, which embodies the outlaw archetype. You have Disney that embodies the magician. You have Google that is trying to assimilate the world's knowledge in the sage. You have Nike that represents the hero. You have Procter and Gamble, the mother company, that represents the caregiver. So on and so forth. Victoria's Secret is the lover. I can go on forever. And so that's just one example of archetypes. And archetypes show up absolutely everywhere. And we also, as humans, go through various different archetypes. As males, we often go through a joker in various different variations or pathways. There's the joker, there's the hero, there's the king archetype, and as you move later, you move on to the magician archetype. And so it's the same on the more female side, but I just gave you the male example because I'm more familiar with that. Then there is myths, and there's this mythical patterns. And we have always understood our world. A worldview was always created by the myths that we told ourselves, or that was embodied within the culture or within society. Back in the day, our myths encapsulated man stealing fire from the gods and then being punished for them. And that created a certain idealism for man to reach up towards. And that's fantastic. And now in today's day and age, our myth is something completely different. It's based on slave-based capitalism. Our heroes are celebrities and CEOs. Our temples are our banks. It's a completely different myth and things that we tend to worship, and that creates a completely different world view. And so that's really, really interesting. And all of this stuff, it really shapes our dreams, our religion, our art, and behavior across culture. These myths, these ideas, this, etc. Like, you can also see it in our art. So when it comes to the movie The Matrix, and The Matrix is so cool because it's a perfect expression of how the unconscious shows up through individuals to express to us what is happening in reality. The Matrix is very, very real. It literally, in the sense, it's not maybe necessarily literal in that way, but the sentinel are pendulums who feed off of us. And we are also put into cells, but they don't, it doesn't have to mean that we have tubes stuck to us, but that it's more like information cells. And that the structure tells us what it wants. It gives us things to keep us asleep and relatively happy. And so all of that shows up through our art and our movies, and it's absolutely fascinating once you're able to wake up to these things and see the patterns. The fourth characteristic is that the unconscious communicates to us in symbols, right? In images. It also in our dreams, our unconscious self dreams. Carl Jung argued, and I'm fully bought into this because I do a lot of dream work as well, is that our dreams are our unconscious self speaking to us via symbols. And there's a wonderful book called Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung and his disciples that help to explain and help you interpret the various symbols that you receive within your dreams. And it's absolutely, part of my language, well, actually, I won't swear, freaking insane and incredible once you begin to analyze your dreams and interpret them, because over time, you will literally see the way that you are evolving and the way that you're growing. And I even had one time when I cried with gratitude to be able to have this beautiful communication between me and my unconscious self. And so, Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful and incredible. So, fourth is symbolism. If you want to understand the world, you want to understand symbolism. The fifth characteristic is that the unconscious is autonomous. And Jung really emphasized this quite strongly, meaning that the unconscious has its own will. And I'm going to give you a wonderful analogy a little bit later on about that. And so that's why people often say, I don't know why I did that. I don't know what came over me. It was as if it was stronger than me. I felt possessed. It just sort of happened. And this is when the unconscious complex temporarily takes over. And sometimes it does that in order to compensate or in regards to self-protection and preservation. So that's the aspect that the unconscious is autonomous. The sixth aspect of the unconscious is that the whole goal is for individuation. That's the whole goal of the psyche and for humans is individuation. And individuation means integration, reconciling the ego and the soul. And it's all about becoming whole rather than just like becoming good or what you think is good. It's about encapsulating all of yourself. And that's why people talk, or it's becoming quite popular to do shadow work. I think that's because it also kind of sounds sexy and people are getting into the dark, but really that's embodying all of your characteristics and traits and understanding all that you are in all of your mess. Usually we tend to put a very perfect image out there for the world because that's how we want to be interpreted. It's a certain identity, but we as humans are very, very messy and complex. And that's why it also kind of shows up in dreams. And not to be taboo, and some of you might not be familiar of this, but like, you know what, actually let me not say that part. I'm going to keep that part to myself because I don't want to lose you guys before I have you. Okay. And a part of this individuation or integration is also really interesting to surrender of the ego's control. Sometimes in the way that life works is that the subconscious or your higher self or something will often put you in scenarios where there is no way of thinking yourself out of it. Myself, I've been in so many of these scenarios and it's hard to explain them because they only kind of really make sense to me, but I couldn't fucking figure my way out of it at all. And I realized it was one of these scenarios where the unconscious puts you in some sort of weird situation where you can't get out of it. And the only way of releasing yourself is to just let go of control. Also, Carl Jung emphasized how important imagination is when it comes into this area because we are imaginative beings. And I talk about this a lot. Literally, it's the way that we communicate with fucking, pardon me, I didn't mean to swear when it came to that. I just get a little excited with God, our divine Father and our divine Mother. That is how we create. Conscious creation is the highest form of prayer. And you're not really doing, in my opinion, transurfing or even Neville Goddard's work if you're not imagining, if you're not visualizing. And visualization is the wrong term for this, right? And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. Visualization kind of demeans it a little bit. Imagination is our God-given creative tool. That's what comes first. And then all manifestations or realizations of materialized reality comes afterwards. We imagine first, then everything else comes out of that. And that's the way that God is living his existence as well. We are living in the dream of God. And when we consciously create, we are playing with our Father. We are playing with our Mother. Okay, that was a bit of a ramble there, but I'm very passionate about that. So in order to kind of summate what Jung's expression of the unconscious is, I will provide a sentence. The unconscious is a living, intelligent, autonomous field of psyche that guides, corrects, and completes the conscious mind when it is willing to listen and destabilizes it when it refuses. Now we're going to talk about the beast, the wonderful analogy that speaks to Carl Jung's fifth characteristic of the unconscious, that it is autonomous, meaning it has a mind of its own, and this analogy does a wonderful job of expressing that. Most people believe that they're in control because they can make their own plans and set goals. But as the old saying goes, we make plans and the gods laugh. But in reality, your mind is split into two very different parts. In this case, we have the rider, which is represented by the unconscious self, and the beast, which is the unconscious mind. The rider also represents logic. It also represents willpower, as well as conscious long-term intention, right? It sets the direction of things. But if the beast doesn't want to go there, it won't follow. And the beast, it is a massive emotional force beneath the surface. So it's very much rooted in its emotion. It gets programmed through emotions, as you can kind of peek a little bit down here. And it also is really kind of concerned with survival. It's driven by survival, and it's also very much dealing with deep-seated patterns. So what you really want to understand, though, is that the beast is incredibly powerful, right? It is this 10-ton mythical dragon. And it is much more powerful than the rider, bar none. Easy does it. The much more powerful. It has control over your entire life. And so if you're in misalignment, then that can cause a lot of trouble. So this is why willpower sort of fails. You can pull the reins all you want, but if the dragon or the beast doesn't want to move, you're not going anywhere. And so we often call this self-sabotage, but it is much more fruitful and productive if we refer to this as self-protection, because then we can understand what is going on. Okay, so that's from the dragon's perspective, or the beast's perspective. You see it, the rider sees this as self-sabotage because it pulls the rein and it goes, oh, I know we're gonna have a much more fruitful life and a better experience if we go this way. But if the beast is afraid and thinks that is very dangerous for us based off of what it learned during our childhood, or usually it's within your younger life, then it's not going to move in that way. And so the rider sees that as self-sabotage. Why do we kind of continue repeating the same patterns that keep us stagnant? But really the beast sees it as self-protection. It's important to understand that. So if the dragon learned early on that being noticed is dangerous, or that success causes conflict, or even visibility causes conflict or being bullied or in some sort of way, it will view your goals that are very reasonable and fruitful to you as threats to your safety. It will create, quote unquote, bad luck, procrastination, or anxiety, or really like doubt, and making you play it small to keep you in the cage where it knows that you can survive. And so effort alone never works, because you're trying to win a tug-of-war match against a 10-ton mythical animal like a dragon. To change your life, you have to stop fighting the beast and start retraining it to trust the new destination. So that brings us into a wonderful segue into how the subconscious gets programmed. Now, there are no hardened rules and criteria of this is what you need to hit, the three criteria methods for an idea to get embedded energetically in the subconscious mind. All we can really know and say about this is that it has to be an intense emotional experience. And an intense emotional experience is unique and based on each individual, right? It's very relative depending on the life that you have. In addition, it's not just about the emotion or the scenario happening to you, but it's also how you process it. I'll speak about that in a second a little bit more, but first, these intense emotional experiences can take the shape of one or two forms. One, it could be like this big trauma dump. So maybe think like a car crash that makes you then fearful of driving. Or it could be a chronic drip. And this could be something like, getting bullied in school for being your more authentic, wild, cool self, right? And this kind of happened a little bit to me. I stood out a lot in school for just being, fun-loving, silly, and a little bit wild. And I got sort of bullied a little bit because of that. Now, I was able to process it, so it didn't really kind of I think affect me a little bit too much, but that's something that I still had to work through actually when it came to showing up online and dealing with my deep-seated emotions of humiliation. Actually, it did have an effect on me because I did have to deal with that. Never mind, I take that back. Okay, so what I wanted to say about these, it's not about trauma happening to us. The issue is really actually about how we process a particular trauma. And when I say trauma, it doesn't have to be these super crazy, intense, what you think about when the term trauma, but just something that has an experience that has an emotional impact or an energetic impact that then seeps into the subconscious mind. And sometimes these things live on the surface and you're kind of aware of them, and you can kind of see the fish floating on the surface, and sometimes they're much deeper below where the light can hit it. And it's all about the way that you can process it. So there's this wonderful study done on individuals who went to war and their ability of dealing with life when they came back from it, whether they were processed with post-traumatic stress disorder, was dependent on the type of upbringing and the support that they had from their family. So the more support and the more tools they had in order to communicate and share their problems or being able to regulate themselves, the more that they were able to assimilate back into society rather than causing these psychological disorders that disrupted their life moving forward. And so now I'm going to provide some examples of how the subconscious mind gets programmed via an intense emotional experience. I'm going to do a few different examples. When it comes to weight, let's do one on that. Imagine someone who grew up in a home where there was a lot of chaos, a lot of argument, a lot of instability and emotional neglect maybe. But there was always food in the fridge, right? And now eating became a reliable source of comfort and regulation. When stress or fear showed up, eating then calmed the body. The nervous system was able to relax, and over time, that relief got wired into the subconscious and the association was made to food. And so food became associated with safety, right? And then fullness became associated with feeling calm. And then that extra weight, that meant protection. And so if you fast forward to adulthood, On a conscious level, this person knows what they want. They want to lose weight, right? They want to feel healthier. They want to be more confident. They want to be energized. And that's that conscious mind setting a goal, right? The rider on the dragon. That's what they want to go. But on the subconscious level, the dragon remembers something different. It learned that food equals safety and that a certain body size equals survival. So when stress rises and emotions spike or uncertainty appears, the subconscious automatically pulls towards eating and maintaining that familiar weight. It was trained to do this, to keep the person safe. And so the conscious mind pulls in one direction, but the subconscious then pulls in another, and you end up staying stagnant. Let's do another example of weight so that we're not one-dimensional and we know that it applies to various different scenarios. Also, what I want you to do here is, as I provide these examples, there are billions of different ways that this can unfold because life manifests in an infinite different types of ways. And so what I want you to do here is, while you're seeing these examples, I want you to take this idea and the way that I'm sort of framing it and think about your life. And so when it comes to repeating patterns or things that you're stuck with, you want to identify these core memories and core experiences or things where an intense emotional scenario occurred that then taught your subconscious mind that you need safety and protection in a particular area. And it doesn't just have to do with that, but that's just one of the dominant areas to look at. And then you want to use these frameworks as models for your own life. And so just have that consideration as we move along through these. So another example for the weight issue when it comes to the subconscious, imagine someone who experiences unwanted attention or criticism or bullying or even objectification, maybe during young adulthood when it wasn't, appropriate for that to happen. The subconscious mind then sees being seen as dangerous. Then it also sees being attractive as you inviting a threat of some kind. Then it also learns that visibility equals actually vulnerability. And so you can see how then that extra weight becomes armor, right? It begins to creates distance. It softens attention. And it also makes the body feel safer. And so consciously, the rider obviously wants to lose weight, but subconsciously, the beast resists because it feels like it is removing its protection, its armor, because of the way that it learned through its young adulthood or childhood. Now, let's do a money example. When it comes to success or money, when you consciously think about it, what comes up, right? One of the first things for me that comes up is this idea of freedom, being able to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, not having to, check in on anyone about it or whatever, right? There's freedom. You're no longer caged in by a cubicle. Another idea that comes up is security, right? Feeling a little bit secure. If you can't work for whatever reason, that you're not going to be, on the street. Another aspect is a little bit of comfort. There's nothing wrong with that. A little bit of comfort, being cozy, knowing that you're going to be okay, all of that. And then another one is joy, right? People say money doesn't bring joy. A certain amount, past a certain amount it doesn't, but a certain amount of it does, right? Joy. Being able to maybe bring your friends together, go have certain experiences, travel the world a little bit, visit your family, maybe that lives across a different country. Then another aspect that and maybe we get a little bit more egotistical side of things, but then we have opportunities begin opening up for you, maybe with a little bit more money and success. And another thing could be, maybe it could be pride, being prideful of taking care of your family. That could be something that's relatively positive and shouldn't be seen as negative. And then it could bring a little bit of status, and that's a little bit more ego-driven, but that's okay. Sure, it brings you a little bit of status. Maybe you want to use your status for good. Wonderful. Okay, but then if you have a positive attitude toward it from a conscious level, but you were raised in an environment where money caused a high intensity emotional trauma in some sort of way. Maybe it was arguments between parents. Maybe it was this whole struggle narrative that you can only receive something if you really fight for it, if you really struggle. You have to really sacrifice something in order to get something back. Maybe it was this belief that was embedded in you that rich people are ruthless, and in order for you to be successful, you also have to be ruthless as well. You have to deny your true self of being a wonderful, kind person, and you have to, tap into that more evil side of yourself in some sort of way and step on people in order to get to where you want to go. Or it could have been simply that more money, more problems, right? Etc. And there's more and more and more of that can go. And so that data that was embedded in your hardware, it now becomes a safety protocol for the subconscious. And now the subconscious could associate money or success with a loss of time. And that's a big one that I think about. You're always working on your business instead of enjoying it, particularly if that struggle narrative is happening. You have to build something. You have to go through a lot of stress, having employees, dealing with all of the challenges that business comes with. Maybe it is a sacrifice. You hear a lot of stories about people not being able to see their family or friends, missing out on your 20s or your 30s or love. It also equals more responsibility. No one wants that. It could also mean more conflict, and that's something that a lot of people want to avoid when they're not agreeable people, or when they are agreeable people. Getting lawyers involved, having disputes between your co-founders, those are really big things. Then there's also, when you have more success, there's more visibility, and so then there's more judgment. And then there's also this aspect of greed and maybe moral corruption that we talked about. So even myself, as I wrote this list down, you can see that I had more negatives come up than I did positive ones. And so that's really funny to kind of see. And so this idea, or this association of what negative association of money or success in the subconscious mind now acts as a protective barrier, and now self-sabotaging opportunities will come up. You'll create bad luck for yourself, and you keep yourself in that cage, keeping yourself in doubt and playing small and being safe from the perceived evils of success. And here, this is a wonderful example of how an intense emotional experience could lead to something that should be relatively positive for you from the conscious perspective of moving towards money and success. You can also see how whatever experiences you may have had could have led the subconscious to have seen success as actually a negative thing that it wants to protect both of you from life's woes or problems that comes with visibility, success, and further financial gain. This is where the program gets truly insidious, because it's not just about what you think about money, it's also what you think about yourself in relation to value, right? You will have created in your subconscious mind an invisible barrier or perimeter that you've drawn around your own value. Your self-worth then acts like an energy ceiling, a subconscious limit about how much success you've allowed yourself to handle before you start feeling like an imposter. Now, we all have sort of this financial thermometer within us and like a certain cutoff point. If you haven't programmed it to handle high heat, your subconscious will find a way to blow the fuse and return you to the cold, familiar baseline of struggle. And so there is this wonderful Bible verse that trips up a lot of people, and I absolutely love it. And it goes like this: "For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away." Now, the reason that people find this or are confused by this script is because on the surface, it looks sort of cruel or unfair, but we know better. And if you look at it through the lens of transurfing, it isn't some sort of moral judgment thing. It is a technical description of how the mirror works. Reality functions like a dual mirror. And on one side of the mirror is your internal state. And this is represented by the image, right? You standing in front of the mirror, you are the image. And on the other side of the mirror is material realization. But when it comes to a mirror, that other side of the mirror is the reflection, right? And so we can say that really the reflection is actually an effect of the image side, which is the cause. Pardon me in my writing, it is despicable. I'm still learning how to write on an iPad right now. So thank you for bearing with me. And I've turned off of the auto correction that makes your writing look better because it kind of messes things up. But anyways, so you can see here that the mirror doesn't really care about what you deserve or how hard you are struggling for something. It only reflects the content and the attitude that you are broadcasting. And so that's it. Consciousness feeds off of momentum. And what also kind of came out of this script here is that's why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The mirror only amplifies that which attention is given to. And so the rich man wakes up in the morning and he opens up his balcony of his chalet and sees his Porsche in the driveway and argues with his family or friends or whatever, wife, about which hill and what time they need to go up to start skiing or whatever. And the poor man, he steps out of his apartment, takes the bus to his dead-end job and only thinks about the woes and how he's going to pay for rent the next month and his groceries and inflation and all of that stuff. And so consciousness is fed into the attention. What you continue to feed is what is going to grow. Wherever attention goes, that's where energy flows. And wherever energy flows, that is where life grows. One idea that we always want to keep in mind is that your self-identity equals your reality. Those two words are synonymous. They equal each other. Your self-identity is the container for everything else. It is basically your total vibratory state, which consists of your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, your expectations, your perceptions, absolutely everything. It is the container. It sits at the precipice. And so if your upbringing taught you that you are just a worker and that you're not lucky or that you're meant to struggle for everything that you have in your life, then you have built a self-image of the striver. And so when you encounter now an opportunity that sits above your programmed self-worth, then you'll feel an emotion, maybe something similar to imposter syndrome. It was like this. And so this imposter syndrome, this is not a natural emotion. This isn't an evil-keeled emotion. This emotion then creates something called excess potential that the field can realize and it can read. And the field always likes to stay at equilibrium. And so when you have excess potential, then balancing forces are invited in order to kind of bring everything back into harmony. And so your subconscious mind will play a role along with the balancing forces to even keel everything else, right? Your subconscious will tweak your behavior. It will cause you, for the most part, to doubt yourself or play it small to get you back into your safe level of low self-worth, back into your comfort zone. So when it comes to your comfort zone, if you think about wanting luxury or freedom or ease, but you still self-identify as the striver, the grinder, the one who has to fight for everything and earn everything the hard way, then those higher opportunities will always feel like too much, not for you, or relatively uncomfortable. And anything that consistently makes you uncomfortable won't stay in your life. When something appears that sits above your current self-image, your subconscious feels a mismatch, and that mismatch will create that tension. And to relieve it, unconsciously, you're going to shrink back through doubt, through hesitation, through playing it small, through finding reasons to disqualify yourself. And that's your comfort zone pulling you back in. And your real work isn't chasing bigger outcomes. It's actually expanding the range of what feels natural to receive. So when your comfort zone grows, so do your opportunities. And these opportunities don't feel lucky or surprising anymore. They begin to feel obvious. You begin to expect them as normal. Of course this is supposed to show up. Of course this is mine. This is who I am now. That's what happens when you expand your comfort zone. And because the comfort zone lives mostly in the unconscious, expanding it isn't about convincing yourself. It's about slowly reshaping your identity until the new level feels like home. Again, I want to reiterate why willpower is not enough, right? It is like having a tug of war between you and a 10 or 5 ton beast in this case, because we're doing an elephant. And so the conscious mind, the rider says, I want to go north, because north is where we're going to make our dreams come true. It's where we find love. It's where we're going to live our best life. But if over there, the beast, or the elephant in this case, makes a mountain out of a molehill, right? Even if the dangers to the conscious mind, say for example, it is showing up on camera so that you can communicate who you are and create a personal brand, you go, oh, you know, it is a little bit scary, but it's not a big deal. I'm not doing it in front of everyone. I get to take as many takes as I'd like. And anyone who I have on social media, they're from high school. I haven't seen them in 10 years. But to the beast of the subconscious mind, the elephant in this case, you know, it goes, yeah, but the people that we have in high school, they're the ones who bullied us. They're the ones who judge us. It was so scary back then. We were so afraid of them. It sees this mouse as this crazy, you know, predator now, and it's afraid of moving north. It's afraid of moving in that area. So as much as you pull on those reins to go north, you're not going to go anywhere. Okay, and so that's why it's so important for us to retrain the subconscious mind that the direction that we want to take it to is safe and that they will be protected. And so in order to do this, we want to find some of the subconscious blocks, right? And so these can also be referred to as your limiting beliefs. And in this case, we have the mirror. So everything in your life is a mirror. And the second one we have, this one we can call it the mirror test, but there's no like actual test. It's just looking at the feedback in your life. And then we have journaling. And then we have dream work. And you can kind of think of this in terms of, like think about this as an ocean and fish, different variations of fish that lie within the depth, various different depths within the ocean, right? And so when it comes to identifying subconscious blocks, right, via the mirror, via just looking at your life and getting the feedback of the repeating patterns in your life, whether it is, you know, a relationship that kind of repeats itself over and over again. The faces might change, but the scenario is always the same, or challenges in your life that are always relatively the different characters, maybe different scenarios, but the energetic imprints of it are always the same, or patterns that keep repeating, or blocks that you continue to hit in some sort of way. These are sort of, they're not necessarily in the full unconscious because you can kind of see them, but the patterns might take a little bit of time to kind of like understand what they were. So they are beneath the surface, but you can still see the fish swimming through. Then another tool that you have to yourself is simply journaling. So you can get something incredible happens when we put analog pen to paper. I mean, some people are cool with typing on a computer, but I find pen to paper is something so absolutely magical with it. And you don't need any kind of crazy prompts. You can just put something at the top of the paper and just say, what is the danger of me being wealthy? And don't think about anything. Just write and take account of the list and the things that come up as your viruses and where that came from. The other thing that you can do, and then those are kind of like things that are deeper midway point in this lake or ocean, and these subconscious blocks, they will arise to the surface basically naturally through just free-flowing journaling. And then you have dream work, and these are for the subconscious blocks that are like, you know, you could see them, they might be apparent once they're shown to you, but they're like deep within the ocean, deep within yourself, that you couldn't probably have reached, likely not have reached, without other external help or just on your own. And so in order to do dream work and dream analysis, what you have to do is first recall your dreams. So in order to do this, you have to take a notepad and pen and put it by your bed. This also signals to your mind that you're taking action and intention to remember your dreams. It's similar to the idea of like, you've ever wanted to wake up at 7, but you never like, and when you set an alarm clock, you always almost end up waking at like 3 minutes before 7 o'clock. That's because you have, you know, called out to your subconscious and set the intention with pure intention, with action to say that I'm serious about waking up at 7. And so you did so. And that's also what happens when you take the time to put the journal by your bed, and then when you wake up and you remember a dream and you write it down, you begin to recall it more and more. And so that's the first step, is recalling your dreams more and more. And that's by putting a journal by your bed. And as soon as you wake up, it could be the middle of the night, multiple times throughout the night, you have to turn on your little lamp, you know, get startled, wake up for a little bit. And I know it's annoying. And then you have to write down your dream. And over time, you'll remember more and more and more because you're taking on that action. And so how do we interpret it? One of the ways that you can interpret it actually, and is through you. And before you would need like a Jungian psychologist to help you through this. But now we have various different tools with artificial intelligence. And what they're amazing at is symbolism. And in your dreams, you're going to have all of these different various constructs because your unconscious mind is speaking to you via symbols. It could be the fact that you're sitting in your home and you're in the basement, which means that you're like deep in the unconscious self. And you can have all of your furniture be white, and there's something about that. Why is that furniture white? And then you have a rabbit that runs around on your foot, but that rabbit is black. And then when you put that information in any sort of AI system like ChatGPT or whatever, particularly if you're using a GPT that is dedicated to this, and I know there's ones on Carl Jung and various, I know Eric Godsey has one that's associated with dream interpretation. It will help break down that symbolism. And then what you would do is you associate that with various different, certain symbolism have, they're highly psychic. And what I mean by that is they trigger deep emotions. And so it's these emotions that you begin getting drawn to. And wherever that high emotion is, that's where you're going to get led down towards. And so what you want to identify in this work is two sort of things. One is you want to highlight what are the core memories that led to this deep-seated belief. So the core memories. So it could be one of these things. So an example of the dream, say there is something really emotionally associated with a particular image. Take that when it comes up and you've interpreted that, and then just sit with that emotion. Like, what are the core memories that I have that are associated with this emotion? And then write that down. And then the other thing that you want to highlight is the underlying emotions behind this. And there's a reason for this. I'm going to explain this as well. And so what are the underlying emotions associated with this? Emotions and feelings, this is the language of the soul. This is the language of the subconscious mind. The feeling is the secret, as Neville Goddard said and wrote a whole book about, which was its title. And so those are the three ways of identifying subconscious blocks and the two things that you want to pull out of it during your work, because now we're going to go down to the final part of this presentation, which is how to reprogram or retrain the beast, i.e. reprogram the subconscious mind. There are two ways of reprogramming the subconscious mind. One is through, we can call it inception, and the other one is through the letting go technique. And you can also call inception in transurfing terms, it is referred to as slides. And I'll explain in a second why this is the case. Now, let's look over here at this diagram that I have created. We are projectors of consciousness, and the fact that that's a saying is not a coincidence. We literally project consciousness onto the screen of life, and this analogy does a beautiful job, a simple analogy or metaphor of the projector. You have raw light, a slide, and the screen. Raw light is represented by source light, right? This is the natural light of what it looks like outside of our perceptions or outside of our filters of reality. It's raw reality, how it exists. It is source. It is just, if we weren't here, it was just, how does light look like? How does reality look like beyond our perceptions of it, right? An unfiltered view of reality. Second, here we have the slide. This is the image, right? As you put a slide in a projector, it creates an image. It's a frame of reality that then projects that image onto the screen of life. In this slide, that is really us, right? And we can say that we have one slide. Slide is something that we carry in our minds that other people don't have in theirs. But a slide can also be interpreted as our self-identity. It can be interpreted as our expectations, perceptions, the convictions that we have, ultimately our worldview, etc., thoughts, emotions, etc., etc., etc. And this is also representative of what I mentioned before about how reality works like a mirror. And on one side of the mirror is the image, which is the conscious self, and on the other side of the mirror is the reflection, which is the material realization. And so here, even in this case, you see that reality is a mirror projection, meaning like this is you inside out, flashed on the screen of life that is now being reflected to you. The universe is you in verse. This is a wonderful representation of that. And the way that we change our slides, so our reality, is by changing our slide. And ultimately, a slide is consciousness. And there's a few different kind of slides that we can have, but a main slide that we can use in order to reprogram our subconscious mind is pick a slide that is the opposite of that intense emotional experience that initially created that negative subconscious block. Or another thing that we can do is really move ourself pick a slide of our goal of a scene that depicts it already being achieved, right? And what that does when it comes to your big goal of it being already achieved, as you move along the path towards that goal, you will automatically relieve and work through some of those subconscious blocks, because as you are, expanding or like literally moving towards that goal, you're going to walk through various different doors throughout life, and those experiences are going to ask you to rise above those previous limitations. And so that's one way of busting up a subconscious block, is to pick a target slide of a goal that you have, define it as a scene that we want to already achieve it, that depicts us having already achieved it, and visualize it in our mind's eye over and over again. One, it has to be systematic, meaning it has to be done for a significant period of time, and ideally, for the most part, that you do it when you are in a brainwave of theta, meaning in a meditative state. So right now, I'm probably operating somewhere around a beta state where I'm using my logical mind a lot. Children, the reason why we're so programmable at an early age in life is that for the most part, they are in theta at a particularly young age. And as they get a little bit older, they move into alpha. So we go from, in a waking life, we go beta, which is a higher vibration, then a lower vibration would be alpha, and then below that is theta, and then below that is delta. That is when we are dreaming, in a sleeping, dreaming state. And that's why theta is sort of called the in-between states. It's also the state when you wake up and before you go to sleep. When you wake up and then before you go to sleep. So those are great times to do visualizations, because and that's why I called it an inception. You are getting into that state where you're kind of crossing the bridge over into the unconscious, which is your dreaming and your delta side. And also you're then impregnating it with an intense emotional experience that is now positive, right? And you can do that through a target slide, or you can be more specific and literally do the opposite of that negative sort of experience. And so one could be associated with communication. You could have, if on the more specific experience, you could have a friend tell you, wow, I've been watching your YouTube videos and you are just getting so much better at communicating those ideas. It is absolutely amazing how much you've improved, or how well you are speaking. And that is a wonderful way. And if you repeat that over and over again, and imagine people coming to you expressing how impressed they are with your communication skills, that's something that then you're impregnating your subconscious mind to let go of the fact that you are a bad communicator and needs to protect you from becoming more visible and improving on your personal brand, and then becoming a more wonderful, and then stepping into the role of becoming a true, wonderful communicator when it comes to expressing yourself and your ideas online. Okay, so working with a target slide though does two things. One, it expands your comfort zone, and I've already expressed what that means, right? Like if you are not able to, let me say this again, let me try this again. Most of the time we want to go from the path to getting to something is when we know that it's going to happen for us, then it appears in our reality. But before we get to knowing that something is going to happen for us, particularly if you have big goals, you first have a hope. You hope that something happens for you. And then you move from hope into, oh, I believe that something is going to happen for me. Ultimately, you want to get to knowing, right? You want to get to knowing. When you know that something's going to happen, when you know that the sun is going to rise the next day, you don't even think that that's even a possibility for it not happening, then it has to occur in your life. But the problem is that as we move throughout our life towards our goal and we just believe in something occurring, this leaves a lot of room for doubt. And doubt is very dangerous because doubt is a mind virus and it's going to plague you. But when you get to knowing, reality forms. And so this is what I mean when it comes to expanding your comfort zone and why it is so powerful. The more you visualize your target slide, so that goal frame that you have in your mind of who you are and who you're going to be, then your mind can't tell the difference between what is quote unquote real and what is imagined. So you are literally telling your mind and that this experience has occurred. And then when you're in that deeper theta state, your heart then also has been trained to embody it. So not only is your brain experiencing it, but your body is beginning to embody it. It is beginning to feel the emotions of having achieved that desired reality. And then all of the things that are associated with that are going to fall into place. The second thing why the target slide is very valuable is because it sets the trajectory of the alternatives space. So there are infinite possibilities that can occur in our reality. And there is a space in reality transurfing that is referred to as the alternative space, or I refer to it as the alt space. And here is where any sort of event or scenario or situation, anything that has ever occurred, is occurring, or will occur, exists. Setting your trajectory turning the slide, your target slide, over and over into your mind, it sets the trajectory of the alt space. And it tells life, this is the direction that I want to go. And here's why that's important. As you set this trajectory, this is the trajectory that you're setting. I want to go from a snail to a beautiful butterfly. There is something that occurs in the field. Remember, your thoughts are real, right? You are imaginative beings. This creates a difference in potential. Reality collapses potential into form. And so when there's a difference in potential, what gets activated is, in technical terms in reality transurfing, it is referred to as outer intention. You can also think of outer intention as the force. The force, or outer intention, is the unfathomable power that rules the world. Okay, it is the same outer intention that God uses to create this life and his dream. And so it's something that's outside of you, but you can tap into it, particularly when your heart and your mind are aligned with it. Your heart is represented by your subconscious self, okay? And so that's why it's so important in order for the beast and the rider to be aligned, because when the mind, the rider, and the heart, the beast, i.e. the subconscious mind, are aligned, outer intention is activated and reality moves into form. And so what happens as you set the trajectory of the alternative space and you continue to repeat that target slide over in your mind, what begins to happen is doors open up for you, and you have to walk through those doors. And as you continue to turn the slide over, more doors open up and you walk through that door. And there's this wonderful phrase by Rumi that says, I forget what it says, I forget the exact wording, but it's like, the way doesn't show up and you take the step. You take the step and the way shows up. That's a bad paraphrasing of it, but it's a wonderful quote, and I wish I wrote it in my notes so I could express it properly to you guys because it's beautiful. But it goes something like that. And so that is the whole point of the target slide, is to expand your comfort zone and go from hope, belief, to knowing. And once you go to knowing, it becomes a reality, and also to set the trajectory of the alt space, which then creates a difference in potential, which then gets outer intention, i.e. the force, to get activated and begin reorienting the mirror of reality to actually bring your dream or your target slide or the image that you created into material realization. Now let's talk about the letting go technique. And before we get into the actual technique, I'm going to give you a little bit of a preamble as to why it is so important. So all manifestation at the end of the day, all techniques break down into two. There is imagine, and this slide technique is an imagine one, right? Imagine you have scripting, maybe it's affirmations, revision, etc. You can list them on forever. And then on the other side, there's basically one, and that's release. Or letting go. Also, forgiveness falls into this, but it's kind of, and this is all like the Christian church, or the Christianity is based off of. If you ever read The Course in Miracles, it's all about forgiveness, and forgiveness is about release. So you can add forgiveness here. And then you can also say Ho'oponopono, which is, I believe it's like a Hawaiian shaman tradition where it goes something similar to, please forgive me, I forgive me, oh no, sorry, please forgive me, I love you, I forgive me, I love me. And I think there's another bit upon it, but it's a very simple phrase to help you process certain grievances, and it's very helpful during psychedelic experiences as well. So one of the ways that you can think about letting go and why letting go is so important and so impactful is the following, right? We have this wonderful light within us that is always trying to shine through and radiate its beautiful white light and energy upon us, right? It is always there. You can never let go of it. It is always shining through at all times, no matter what, right? It is always, always, always trying to shine upon us. This is God's light. This is our soul, whatever you want to refer to it. But as we move through life and we move through this dense vibration and experience as humans, we have certain storms that come in, right? And these certain storms leave various different clouds. And these clouds, if they're not processed, they stay here, right? And they block the sun from shining upon us. And what the letting go technique does is it basically helps us delete and process these clouds so this sun can shine upon us again. That is what's happening, and that's what's possible by using the letting go technique. And so it was brought to my attention by its sort of discoverer founder, which is David R. Hawkins. And this is a method for emotional freedom. And he also refers to the fact that with each deep-seated emotion, you have thousands of associated thoughts. And so most of your life and your reality is developed because of your thoughts. And it's these thought loops, right? These thought loops that are on autopilot, and they just go on repeat over and over and over and over and just drive you absolutely crazy. And you can never really kind of let them go because they're associated with these emotions of failure, this emotion of embarrassment, of guilt, of disappointment, of life not working out in a particular way. Whatever it might be, this is your mind on these thought loops, and they're anchored into these emotions. And these deep-seated emotions, when they're released, they also release these associated thoughts, and they bring you a more beautiful existence. And this practice involves consciously allowing, welcoming, and surrendering to the pent-up emotions and negative feelings without judgment, without resistance, or without trying to change them. And by focusing on the raw energy of the feeling rather than the accompanying thoughts, the emotion dissipates on its own, leading to increased peace and reduced inner pressure. And this also can't be associated with just venting. Venting, and I might put up this video of like these called like rage rituals, where it's people just like banging sticks and yelling in a forest, and it kind of became a little bit viral. But which is similar to venting. Venting is not the same as release or letting go, because you're continuously in the cycle of the story that created that emotion in the first place. The whole point is to be with your emotion and just stare at it. Just be with it. Be with it in awareness and allow it to expel its energy without any resistance, without trying to run away, without trying to label it in any sort of way, and allow it to exist. And by witnessing it and then just acknowledging that you're able to let this go, then the energy will dissipate on its own, and you will literally feel it move out of your body. And that's happened to me on several locations, and it's absolutely incredible. I've also brought this up before, and I'm bringing it up again because it's so important. So let's get into the technique and how it works. Now, it is a little bit elusive, let me say this, in the sense of, you're like, is this even a technique? This seems a little bit abstract, and it is until you put it into practice. Once you put it into practice, you will know that it works for you. And so it's gonna seem a little bit abstract as I express it to you now, but once you become aware of it and something comes up, maybe it's this, I had a feeling of deep loneliness the other night. I'm like, oh yes, I'm excited, I get to put this into practice. It went away so incredibly quickly by just facing it, by putting, all the distractions away and just facing it completely. It moved out of me in like literally seconds. And so you do have to put this into practice for it to make sense. But without further ado, let's go into the technique. I'm gonna go over the points on a high level, and then we'll go deeper into each one afterwards. So first, in this process of awareness and acceptance, you wanna become aware of your emotions, thoughts, and feelings. You wanna acknowledge and accept these feelings without judgment. This involves being honest with yourself about what you are experiencing. And so a way of doing this, you can be proactive about it, or you can just move through this as it shows up in your life. And I like to tend to do the latter. As these emotions are just coming up in my life in whatever scenario I'm experiencing, I am choosing to use the letting go technique as I do this. It's also happened to me through a dream work. So I've also had various different dreams where that came up in the morning. I was feeling these deep emotions associated with these dreams, and I dropped into meditation, started visualizing about that dream, which then brought me to the core memory of where those deep-seated emotions came from originally, and then I worked with that and moved from there. Then you want to feel the emotion. So you want to allow yourself to fully feel that emotion without any sort of resistance. You want to experience it to its fullest. You don't want to deny it or even try to amplify it. You just want to let the emotion flow without any sort of attachment whatsoever. And you can help this along by visualizing the core memories that are associated with it. So we've done these two. Then you want to identify the sensations. You want to pay attention to any sort of physical body sensations that might occur, and you want to acknowledge them wherever they are. And so, as I mentioned, for me, shame really kind of shows up right here in the throat, or whether it's embarrassment or whatnot. And then I have anger. Whenever I feel anger, there is some sort of a fire in my belly. And so if you can identify where it fits in your body, where it sits in your body, then you want to do so. The third thing is that you don't want to label the emotion as good, bad, or ugly. You want to just view it as a passing experience and recognize that the emotions are temporary and they do not define who you are. Then you want to ask yourself if you're willing to let go of the emotion. And this is not about forcing yourself to let go, but rather just being open to the possibility. The question is really just an invitation to release the attachment to the emotion. And then you want to make a conscious decision to let go of this emotion. This involves the willingness to surrender and release the grip that the emotion has on you. And it's not really about suppressing or denying anything, but just allowing the emotion to move through you. And then you want to feel that release. As you choose to let go, you want to see if you can actually tap into the sort of sensation or the relief or the lightness and the clarity. You might even have that physical release of energy, literally a vibration that dissipates out of your body. And then finally, if necessary, whether it's with the same emotions, sometimes you don't get it at the root, you sort of just chopped it at the surface, or maybe you've dug in a little bit deeper, but certain deep-seated emotions, they need to be done over and over again for you to properly release them. But also, this is a practice that you might take on and you'll be doing for, I don't want to say forever, but it's something that you might be doing for quite some time until you truly act as a gardener of your own psyche and you begin to work through all of the weeds of your subconscious mind and release a lot of these deep-seated emotions that are weighing you down. And that's it. It is as simple as that. As I mentioned, it is all quite abstract, but I promise you it is so incredibly powerful when you put it into practice, particularly for yourself. And this is the same method that David R. Hawkins did in order to get enlightened. Not only is it a tool for manifestation, but it is a tool for your own transcendence and enlightenment. This is a tool for you to be in a deeper connection with the ethereal source of the world, the sun, God, your soul, etc. And feel that light shining on you always and its presence always in your life. And so that's the letting go technique. And with that being said, that brings me to the end of this presentation on the subconscious mind. I want to thank you for being here and welcome me back to YouTube. If you love this and you want to learn more, subscribe to the channel. I would absolutely love that for you to be here. And if you want to go deeper into this practice of reality transurfing and reprogramming your reality and turning your dreams into real life, I have a community on school where we do just that, with courses, a wonderful group of community, and a constant embedment or integration with this work. You know, there's so many times where you can read a book, do a course, watch a video, and there's that initial momentum. But this type of work, it's necessary for you to constantly be in it, because it takes a very long time for us to reprogram a whole lifetime of work. And so that's what the school community is all about. And if you get involved and you do the practice, I promise no miracles, but something greater than a miracle awaits you. Thank you so very much. Have a beautiful day. I'll see you soon.